I'm Corbett Wall with USDA Livestock and Grain Market News, here with your feeder and stocker cattle market summary report for the week ending January the 25th, where compared to last week's sharply lower closing market, if you remember it turned a lot lower late in the week last week than it opened, but compared to that closing sharply lower market, your feeder cattle sold an additional $3 to $5 lower this week. Stocker cattle and calves sold unevenly steady. Your bigger calves weighing up into your heavy fives and your low 600-pound weight ranges, they sold instances as much as $5 lower in several places around the circuit. And then your peewee calves, especially those thinner fleshed, lightweight stocker kind of calves weighing in the fours and even lighter into the three weights, they were as much as $10 higher where you could find them. And those little things are already getting hard to find, and people are selling cattle ahead of schedule, and we expect those lightweight grazing cattle to be really hard to find from now all the way through the spring. But most of your pressure this week was just lent from last week. Last week was a really tough week with the futures market just going down so hard, all for about 8 trading sessions there. And the Fed market just turned so sour because seemed like just a couple of weeks ago we were up at that 128, 129, and then all of a sudden we're down to 125, and then late in the week 122 and a half, and everything was just against the feeder cattle market last week. This week, of course, we're going to start out lower because we ended the week even more lower than we started last week, so we were lower on the get-go. But in fact, some of those late week sales that were sharply lower last week, this week they were just about steady, and some of them even a bit higher in some spots. But so it seems like maybe we found some footing on this thing. From Wednesday on, it just seemed like we started to find a bottom to this feeder cattle market as your prices just started moderating. Yeah, we're lower than we were a week ago, but at least we've stopped falling. Same thing on your fat cattle market. On Wednesday early, they sold them $1 to $3 lower in all the major areas at 122. But then Thursday, we come back and saw some positive signs as they sold some cattle in the northern areas, steady to $1.50 higher from 122 up to 124. So that gives us an idea that we're going to start the week on a higher note next week. But your receipts are falling rapidly. We knew that we was going to have a big run the first full week of January, and we did indeed. And we expect January to be a pretty big run of feeder cattle, especially up from your central Midwest on north, because that's when people sell most of their calves, previous year's calves. But your receipts are already falling down really fast. This week's receipts were 41% lighter than just 2 weeks ago. So that gives you an idea how quick we're going to fall off. And most everyone you talk to expects these numbers to get lighter and lighter and lighter. And by the time we get to the latter part of February going into March, there's not going to be a whole lot of cattle to sell, and there's not going to take very many cattle to draw a good crowd of buyers, especially for those grazing cattle, because we expect them to just keep gaining in popularity all the time. And our producers have just been pulling cattle ahead and selling them ahead of schedule, and they've been doing that for well over a year, scattered out all throughout the central portion of the United States. Well, most of them are getting now down to where they don't have any more calves to sell, and they're waiting on their cows to calve right now. So we're not going to see these numbers staying up much anymore. We've just about got to the end of the rope as we get into calving time. But these light cattle, these grazing cattle, they can still have some weight to them, weighing in the 5s and 6s if they've got a condition that they will graze. And we know there's not anything for them to graze right now, but it won't take that long, right around the corner. And I know we need rain, but about every spring you see a little bit of green come up, and it'll be that way this time. It'll be more so if we get some rain. But right here at the St. Joe Stockyards this week was the highest market I found. Bell family cattle from down by Warrensburg area sells St. Joe every year. Brought their cattle in, had nearly 600 of them, and the condition is just outstanding. quality is outstanding. The weigh up is more than fair. And all those cattle just peas in a pod when they get them sorted up. But they had a short load, about 80 head of 521-pound steers, bring 195.10. That's starting to think back to last spring when those 5 weights were getting up in the $2 range. But that's the highest we've seen them in a long time, 195.10. And then they had one package, 105 head of their big sisters weighing 682, but still got a grazing type condition. Those 682-pound heifers bring 149.10, and they're not going back for replacement. So those cattle will be bound for a northern Flint Hills ranch here and probably spend all summer out there. But sure need rain. A lot of guys are really giving up hope in the plains and the Midwest. But you know, the outside 2/3 of the United States has had rain and snow and moisture all along, and it keeps closing in and bound and determined at some point we're probably going to get some, whether guys think it can rain or not. This week's regional weighted averages in the north central states, an 800 to 900 pound steer cost you $139.12 compared to $141.55 a week ago and $148.47 a year ago. Notice we're quite a bit, almost $10 back of year ago prices now. South Central states, 700 to 800 pound steer cost you $144.13 compared to $145.07 last week and $151.56 a year ago. Down in the Southeast, a little 4 to 5 weight grazing calf cost you $170.98 compared to $168.20 last week and $172.86 a year ago. That wraps up your market summary for this week. Check out our website for more market information at marketnews.usda.gov. And from the Regional Market News Office in St. Joe, Missouri, we'll talk to you next week.